Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss The Pianist, starring Adrian Brody and Thomas Kretschmann, directed by Roman Polanski. Now, I'm kind of familiar with what happened to Roman Polanski with the situation with the Sharon Tate murders by the Manson family, and and that was around the time of that movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But the only minor difference is that movie with by Quentin Tarantino is fiction compared to what happened in real life, whereas Mr. Polanski is he's not coming back to the States because of those situations. I can't get into this right now because this is not the movie that did that. That would be more like Rosemary's Baby, if memory serves me right. Maybe a little after that, I forget. But let's. But what about this movie? Am I doing well? I have seen it before, but not when it first came out because I was a little too young, and I didn't know too much about it until I eventually saw it in the theater. I think after Adrian Brody won his Oscar, and we'll see how he does in this film. Let's just get into it and find out. We open with old footage of Poland back before World War II, and we get to a Polish Jewish pianist named Władysław Spielman. Forgive me if I said that wrong, because I'm not very good at saying Russian names in general, so forgive me for that, as I'm going to do my best to say it. So, yeah. As I'm going to call him for the rest of the show, Spielman, played by in his first Oscar winning performance by Adrian Brody, playing some classical music like a professional pianist would do as the war comes in the studio where he's recording in a studio in Poland in the year 1939. As Spielman meets his friend's sister Dorota, and they get home to where it's a war zone and decide to move away from it in World War II. And the acting by Adrian Brody is beyond magnificent, as he made one of his best performances as well as his recent Oscar win for The Brutalist. As the Germans take over the land of Poland, no thanks to Adolf Hitler, because remember, he was the reason he had a lot of Jewish people dead back in World War II, as the Americans weren't involved until 1941 when Pearl Harbor happened. As they move away from the war zone and get new furniture, and Spielman and his family argue about the furniture, as Spielman makes a call to someone about his future career, as he works as a pianist in a fancy restaurant. And he walks into Dorota, to a restaurant where Jews are not allowed in. And sadly, it was like that back in the days of World War II in Poland and any country with the Jewish community, as that can be anywhere in the planet back in the day, I'll say. And if I said that disrespectfully, I apologize, as I'll do my best to find a safer way to call him the Jew to talk about the Jewish. But there were times this movie was fucking hard to watch for damn sure. Spielman learns the Jewish are moving to a different area in Poland where there's very tight space, while they sell some stuff, including the piano of Spielman, having no choice but to tell the buyer to just take it, while moving on to 1942. And the Jewish move away from the neighborhood, as Dorota believes this is a disgraceful move of the Germans to pull this off, as they build a wall. And where the fuck have I heard this before? Oh, wait, and I hate talking about this, but I'm referring to today's politics. As I'm only, and I'm going to just say this one time, just for anybody that doesn't know me too well. I'm only on the independent side, as I don't care for either side. As Spielman and a friend walk around the area while it's too fucking crowded, and so many people watch to see what the Germans are up to, as I like the costume designing throughout the movie, as there's some tremendous costumes from start to finish. The family continues to argue about the limited space while Spielman plays the piano as a job in a restaurant he works at, as Spielman is asked to stop playing for a second while a couple of jackasses play with their coin until they tell him to continue playing a minute later. And we move on to Spielman after asking a friend for a job, and asks Majorik, I don't know if I said the name right, forgive me, as he can't find Spielman a job anywhere, as he's a musician, and we see a child getting tortured by a German soldier until he's dead. But come on, he was hit in the legs. Well, how in the fuck is he dead after that? But to be fair, They find ways to kill people in the most realistic way in movies about World War II, as Spielman gets into argument with Henrik about the parasites that are the Germans, while their father blames the American Jewish as they don't do shit. And they stop eating because of German soldiers looking in a building for some Jewish to kill for sport. Which sounds fucking depressing for damn sure, but honestly, it was history, as director Roman Polanski does a fantastic job at showing the cruelty of the Nazis, but also telling a survival story in World War II, which is something I'll get into later in the show. But this is nowhere near as good as Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards, where they kill the Nazis. People are starving in the Jewish community while Spielman gets interrupted at work for a great reason as the Germans hunt for them as they're Jewish, and their scenes are just as depressing as watching the entire scenes of torture in Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List, which is a movie I reviewed a long time ago, as an old man with some kids is making himself look like an ass in front of the Germans and eats all of a woman's food, which is painful to watch, as most of the movie is. And do we need to see how painful it was to go through these times? No, because this movie is a little too long at 2.5 hours. Like, cut some of the repetitiveness out of how hard it is to watch the movie. So I'm glad it didn't get the best editing Oscar in the year of 2003. A German soldier barges into Spielman's home, the Spielman home, and attacks the Jewish, taking a couple of people with them, and they shoot the rest dead, and Spielman has no choice but to move himself and his family away from their homes, and their father believes the situation is a disgrace to the world in which it is. And the character I cared about this whole movie was Spielman and no one else, but maybe one German character that will be introduced so late in the movie might be another one. Well, but I'll get there when I get there. But people are struggling to live, eat, drink, and pay for things because of the Nazis, while the father asks the little boy what are they going to do with the money as he's getting something, I forgot what it was, as the father gives 20 zloty, which was what their kind of money they used in Poland, as the boy believes it for a cause. And eventually Spielman gets separated from his family and tries to catch up with them, but the Germans force him not to leave, which is super fucking depressing. And the cinematography is great, but at the same time, very haunting shots. Like Spielman crying as he's walking by because he's missing his family is a great shot by director Roman Polanski and cinematographer Powell Edelman. And the movie is very well shot and well made. The Germans continued to kill the Jewish one by one or put them to work, as well as march with the German soldiers, and they get shot dead while Spielman watches. And Spielman carries something up a building the Jewish are building and have lunch, as well as getting back to work, and spills some bricks and get beats up while this torturing business is going on far too long. And I'm an hour into the movie and I'm waiting for the survival story Spielman goes through for the rest of the movie, as this is getting a little repetitive for me. The Germans get some good news and deliver it to the Jewish working for them, and they continue to work after Spielman gets tortured in the previous day. He carries some potatoes and steals a few of them in a bag and throws it to the other side. Meanwhile, later at night, the Jewish get to sleep, and Spielman asks one of the guys for a favor, and he wants to get the hell out of German captivity to find his family as the next day comes, and a German soldier asks Spielman to open a bag as he steals a few potatoes and throws them at Spielman, and receives word from his coworker about his family, and the German beat them because it's New Year's Eve. That's another nitpick, as that doesn't make too much sense. But the writing is rather pretty good, but despite this is based on a book by Spielman himself, is a good movie so far. Spielman gets out of German captivity and bumps into, oh my god, let me see if I'm saying this name right, G.B.M.H, and stays with her. And this is when the movie becomes a survival story, as an hour and 11 minutes into the movie comes, and he takes a bath and is advised to keep moving by G.B.M.H's husband, And that's what I would give as far as people hunting people goes, is to keep moving, and they put in a comfortable place for a few days with food as Spielman is on the run. And this is when the movie gets pretty good, but not as good as I remembered it being back in the day. We move on to 1943, and he stays inside away from the Germans while seeing some Jewish people burning from the flamethrower, getting every single one dead. As days later, Jebzinski comes by the house to give Spielman some more food, and the husband tells Spielman he might have to leave soon as soon as possible because the Germans are getting closer and closer to finding him as he tries to hide from them. As he sees the Germans leave the building, and he looks for something to eat and makes a lot of noise and packs his things up quickly, while a neighbor almost calls the authorities on him, and a woman neighbor believes he's a Jewish man as Spielman escapes her to find another place to stay at for now. And when I saw this back in theaters, that got me scared for Spielman, as I was getting worried about him at this point in the movie. Spielman finds Dorota with her husband after the situation happened, as he was sent to her address, and he's breathless and needs something to eat, and sleeps there for the night as they hide Spielman from the Germans. And there were times the movie went through confusing routes, but it took me a trip to IMDb to know what the fuck was going on at this point in time, as the husband puts Spielman to a different flat. Now, in case if anybody doesn't know what that flat is, it's an apartment in Europe. And Spielman learns the Russians are working for the Germans, or maybe they work against the Germans. I couldn't tell you what the fuck's going on. And Dorota's husband locks Spielman in the flat as they try to make a sound. They tell him tries to not make a sound, but Spielman sees a piano as he pretends to play it with his fingers instead of actually playing it, which is smart of him as someone who remembers Spielman, but he doesn't remember that person who is a technician helps him out. As we move on to days later, and he has a beard and is worried about the Germans going after him. And this could be in the editing room floor, as that felt a little repetitive too. Dorota and her husband go to Spielman while he has some kind of disease, and she warms him while she has to leave the country while she ways and tries to say her goodbyes to Spielman and leaves him forever, which is so damn depressing, as I was worried for the poor guy at this point. But the good news is a doctor comes to heal Spielman, and we move on to 1944, and we get a shootout against the Germans, as well as some spies and some kind, and nighttime comes, and the area is on fire. And the next day, no more water for Spielman, while a couple of spies are killed, and Spielman is warned to get out of the building when a tank comes in and gets locked inside the flat until they put a hole on the building where he's at and gets out of the fucking war zone, which was intense for damn sure. I mean, oh my god. Not only is this movie depressing, but very intense at the same time. Spielman hides around from the outside from the Germans, and lies there pretending to be dead as some approach, but they don't see him alive, which thank God for that, as he hides in a place that I swear to God thought was the doctor's office, as he was sleeping in the hospital that night, and looks for things to help keep him alive, for example, like food, for example. And German soldiers burn some Jewish bodies, and next thing you know, a soldier with the flamethrower burns down the hospital with it, and Spielman escapes while breaking a leg from jumping out. And sadly, I know what that feels like. I broke my leg in 2003, in which I won't get into specific details at this point and gets to the other side of Poland, which is completely ruined by the Germans, and goes into a place where someone has powder to make cucumbers, and here's a couple of soldiers from Germany, and looks for a place to hide, and here's a piano playing. And I felt the pain Spielman was going through, as Waldo felt very bad for him. Like, I thought his life was lost, no thanks to the Germans. And that's how much I cared for Spielman as a character. Spielman tries to get some water as he makes noises and gets encountered by a German soldier named Captain Wilm Hosenfeld, played by Thomas Kretschmann, and this is the other character I kind of care for because he saves his life as he learns he was a pianist and wants him to play some music for him on the piano and takes care of him until the war is over. And fun fact, Thomas Kretschmann will eventually work with Adrien Brody again in the Peter Jackson 2005 film King Kong. And he'll appear in other stuff I reviewed him a few times, like the second Avengers movie, Age of Ultron, while in the mid-credit scene in Captain America, The Winter Soldier, and I also reviewed him in Blade 2, Cars 2, and Resident Evil Apocalypse, as well as so many other movies I've seen him in, but not going to name them all, as like I said, he helps Spielman hide from the other German soldiers until the war is over, and I cared for him a little bit for a couple of reasons. One is because he saved the protagonist's life, and two, because he showed up in the 2-hour mark for a 2.5-hour movie, which is a little too late for me to care for him too much at this point in time. Wilm lets Spielman go and checks on him the next day and sees how he's doing, giving him some bread, as well as Spielman eats the bread and jam and gives him the bread knife as well. As the next day, Wilm also gives Spielman his coat because he's looking frozen. While the war is over and the Germans lost it, and I didn't realize this, but the Russians were fighting against the Germans for Poland's sakes. As Spielman goes outside wearing the German coat, and a couple of people are led to believe Spielman is a German, but he says he's Polish, and they realize he's Polish based on his accent, and they ask why the fucking coat, and Spielman says because he's cold, which makes sense. And we move on to people seeing a German camp and calls them murderers, while Wilm asks a musician to have Spielman help him out like he did with him, and Spielman plays the same tune as they start the movie and gets asked about Wilm's help as they left him, and I'm led to believe he's dead based on what the biopic script at the end of what happened to Wilm tells me. In the final minutes, as he plays for a concert full of people, and we see Spielman died in the year of 2000, while Wilm must have died in the year 1952, and credits roll to Spielman playing the final tune throughout the credits, and people absolutely love it, and the climax was pretty good. But how good was this movie? Let's get into the rating and find out. I'll give this movie a 7.8 out of 10. There were times the movie was hard to watch at times, for damn sure, as Adrien Brody gave one of his best performances, as the Oscar was well-deserved, just like earlier this year with The Brutalist, as that was his second Oscar win. But I have to confess, back in 2003, I expected Daniel Day-Lewis to win for Martin Scorsese's Gangs in New York, as that was the better performance in my opinion. But to be fair, I didn't see this movie until after he got the Oscar. But don't get me wrong, Adrien Brody was great here, as well as the costume designing is tremendous from start to finish, as most of the movie was just painful to watch. But at the end of the day, I really liked the movie very much, and like Schindler's List, it was a hard sit-down to view twice for the review. But I really liked the survival part of the story, as well as I'm glad this didn't get the Best Editing Oscar of 2003, as this movie was a little bit too long at 2.5 hours, and the repetitiveness of the Nazis torturing the Jewish people could have been in the editing room floor, as I admire the survival story, as director Roman Polanski does a great job at telling that kind of story, as he and the cinematographer Paweł Edelman does a great job with the shots, as they're great and haunting in my opinion. The only character I gave a damn about was Spielman and somewhat the German soldier Captain Hosenfeld, or Wilm, who is barely in this movie, so I can't find a good reason to care for him other than he saves Spielman's life at the end of the movie, as the first hour is basically torture after torture after torture, but the rest of it is a survival story, which I'm a giant sucker for, and I did like this movie quite a bit, and this is a recommendation for this movie, but there were a few things I nitpicked. I talked about it, but I still think it's a good movie with the tremendous performance by Adrien Brody. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for this review, and until then, classic music time.